Hey, I'm Chris. I'm going to make a video here about installing NixOS on real hardware with a ZFS encrypted root because I am a glutton for punishment. No, actually, it was quite easy. I am a ex Ubuntu user mostly, although I've been around Linux for many years. The X being the last X. Before that, I used a bunch of different things, but I really like the feature in Ubuntu 2004, which was experimental, that had a ZFS root that was pretty easily encrypted. It wasn't quite as automated as it could be, but managed to figure it out, and it was nice. It had snapshots at every time. Every time you installed a package or made some network change, it would make a snapshot before it applied the change, so you could always roll back, and it was really nice. I liked it a lot. It was also easy to back up because ZFS send and receive and stuff. It was really neat, nice. But 2204 came out, and for whatever reason, I gotta be honest, I didn't really spend a lot of time trying to fix it. But I did try to dive down into it. Their installer had the same experimental feature, and actually they improved it to the point where you were able to encrypt it without doing any command line faffing as well. But for whatever reason, it just would not work on my physical hardware. I got it to work in a virtual environment, but I just couldn't figure it out. So instead of fighting with it, I just installed Manjaro, which had ButterFS and a Lux encryption and time shift, which did essentially the same thing. It was fine. It worked great. But I actually like ZFS a little bit better just because it's maybe more mature and easier to back up. I'm just more familiar with it. So in the meantime, I have Manjaro installed on several systems. I'm not in love with it. It's all right. It's okay. Like I like it. It smells a little like Axe body spray to me, a little bit. But it doesn't suck. It's pretty good. But I was messing around. I saw a video. I'm surprised it took me this long to like dive into it. But I saw a video by DJ Ware about NixOS, and I am sort of familiar with what NixOS was. I know some folks who were involved with it, but I just never really thought about it. I mean, if I had thought about it, I might have tried it when I switched to Manjaro, but it just escaped my mind. So I tried to install that, and I got ZFS root working pretty easily. I was really surprised at how easily it worked. And so I decided, okay, well, and also the way it works is just super different and super interesting, in a way that Ubuntu and Manjaro just aren't. That they're great distributions and they work really well, but they're custom partitioning, hard drive to install Ubuntu on it. There's not a lot of profit involved in that. Like it's something I've done before. I'm not going to learn anything doing that, but messing with NixOS, I figured I would, and I did, and it's really, really interesting. So anyway, I'm not an expert, so if you notice errors, please point them out to me. I'm not going to explain very much about Linux in this video. I think in reality using NixOS is going to require a lot of Linux experience. I don't think it's really for noobs. You might be totally lost, but maybe, I don't know. We'll see. In any case, here's what I got. I have a Lenovo Thinkpad P51. I have several ThinkPads. This is just kind of a spare one that I'm setting up, and I was just playing around with NixOS on it. And I am not a big fan of videos that show people installing things into virtual machines, because we all know it's going to work on a virtual machine. It always does, because that's what everybody uses. But does it work on hardware? Does it work on my hardware? Is it going to crap itself out? So have been using this ThinkPad, and it has this awful Nvidia Optimus graphics in it, total garbage. It can run in two modes. One is called hybrid mode, which essentially means the Intel GPU that's on the motherboard does most of the rendering, and the other one is discrete mode, which there's a separate Nvidia GPU in it. In discrete mode, the Intel GPU is not used. It is the bane of my existence. All my ThinkPads have it. It is total junk. But, often you can make it work. I mean, I've made it work on everything, Ubuntu, Manjaro, whatever. It does work eventually, but it is not much fun. It'd be way better to have an AMD thing. So the machine I'm going to set up will be in hybrid mode, which means it'll largely be using the Intel graphics, but the way I set it up, it'll also work in discrete mode. So we won't get a GUI working in the first part of the video because of this Optimus stuff. As a matter of fact, the new quote-unquote version of NixOS that was released, at least the ISOs that were released, I didn't know it at the time, but apparently it's supposed to give you a GUI when it boots, but not on this laptop. It doesn't do that. So we are in console purgatory until I get the machine partitioned and up and running enough to be able to configure the X server. Because of that, the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to use a tool called Script, which is something that will record my keystrokes and the output of my interaction with the console to a text file. And then I'm going to record myself talking, and it'll be running. And then I will replay it, line up my voice with the replay of it in the video editor, so it'll be as if you're seeing it. But what you won't see is anything before I start the script command. So like the splash screen or anything that would happen during a reboot, or basically anything. So anyway, you'll get the idea as I do it. All right, so let's do this thing. Well, as it turns out, the script thing that I was just talking about, the ANSI screen recorder, didn't work so well. So what I ended up doing was I am now SSH'd into the system that I want to install Nix onto. The system is booted with the installer USB stick, and it is running SSHD, and I have SSH'd into it in order to install stuff on it. So what you see there is the system. I could have taken this drive out of the system, I suppose, and partitioned it, but there's no real need. I have the installer USB stick has all the tools required to do partitioning and formatting, even for ZFS. So the first thing we need to do is figure out which disk we want to install to. And it is this one, this NVMe, sorry, this one, NVMe 0N1. And so I want to get rid of any stuff that's already on there. It's got a couple partitions on there. They're just not being used right now. It's just junk, so let's get rid of them. Right. Oops. Sudo. All right. And now, I could have done the rest of partitioning with SGDisk, but I ran out of time preparing to make this video, and I'm just going to do it interactively with FDisk. Hope that's okay with you. So, here we go. We're going to make it a GPT device, because it's this laptop only works in GPT mode, EFI mode, doesn't have legacy BIOS support. It does, but it's not enabled. So the next thing we need to do is make the first partition, which will be our EFI system partition. The partition number is 1. First sector is fine. That's 2048, fine. Last sector, probably 2 gigabytes. It seems probably excessive. On the other hand, yes, I do want to remove that signature. On the other hand, I had a bunch of problems with in Ubuntu of running out of space on the boot partition, which this will be used as a boot partition, so I don't want to have that problem again. Right? Don't really care. This is a terabyte hard drive. 2 gigabytes is nothing. So I'm gonna make another. Oh, we have to set the type of that partition. We set it to 1 EFI system, and then we're going to make another partition number 2. That's correct. First sector looks correct. That's the sector right after the first partition, and the ending sector is the last sector on the disk. That looks correct as well. We're only going to have 2 partitions on this disk. And yes, I want to remove the signature. That probably won't happen to you. This is just left over from what was on it before. So now we can write that out. And at this point, if we ls block again, yes, we have a 2 gig partition and a 951 gig, 2 gig partition. So we don't have a swap partition. I don't find swap partitions particularly useful when you have lots of memory. It's not useful. So I don't know if this setup would prevent you from making a swap file, because the root is going to be encrypted. But I don't care. So I'm not going to care. So sudo. We're going to put a FAT32 partition. Sorry. Volume on the first partition of that NVMe drive, and that worked. And now we're going to add a label to that volume. We're going to call it NixBoot, and then we are going to make a Z pool for both our home and root volumes, which will be separate, but in the same ZFS Z pool. I'm just going to paste this in here. A bunch of this was cargo culted from various sources. Wow. Okay. From the Ubuntu installer and from other places, but the interesting bits of this are the encryption, AES 256 GCM, and the key format is passphrase and blah 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 blah. So all this is pretty much required. By the way, I'll have a link to a working configuration.nix. You don't have to squint at the screen if you're going to play along at home. You have the same ThinkPad. I'll put a link in the description to something that has both the hardware configuration and the configuration.nix files in the description. So what are we doing? We're going to create that pool. It's got compression, it's got encryption, looks good to me. Let's do it. It's going to be on the second partition of that NVMe drive, and we're going to call it NixRoot. Oh, shit. I got to sudo it. Alright, we're going to give it a passphrase. And that's the passphrase that will be used for the ZFS encryption. So at this point, we have a Z pool, to put our volumes in, and we're going to put 2 ZFS volumes inside of this pool. One for the root and one for home. And the reason that we're going to even bother separating those out is because of the way NixOS works. It's kind of pointless to take snapshots of the where NixOS puts its files itself. NixOS tends not to touch things that are in home, home ChrisM, etc., etc. I mean, it might, some stuff does go ahead and sort of set up configuration files and what have you, but for the most part, it doesn't really touch stuff in home, but it does touch stuff everywhere else. So because it already has this concept of generations of, you rebuild it and it recomputes the dependencies that it needs, goes through and creates another generation that you then boot to or switch to. There's no point in having ZFS snapshots on that file system, because basically that's what they would be for. you know, is to go back in time. But you can always go back in time with NixOS anyway. So, but on your home partition, yes, there is reason to have ZFS snapshots. So we just separate them out so that we can only take snapshots if we need to of our home directory. That's why. Get it? Roger, got it. Okay. So what we'll do is we will create our root volume. We're going to call that nixroot/root. And we will create our home volume in exactly the same way. Nixroot/home. And you see that -ohm mount point equals legacy? The reason that that's like that is so that we can, we're at a later step, just a couple of seconds from now, we are going to mount this. As a matter of fact, let's do it right now. I think it's the next step. Let's see here. Sudo. Yeah. So we're going to mount NixOS root into /mount of our install. If we didn't set mount point equal legacy, we wouldn't be able to do that. We wouldn't be able to use the normal mount command in Linux to mount the ZFS volume. So I think NixOS depends on those things being legacy mount points as well. So we just have to specify that. So now we need to make a couple directories on the thing we just mounted. Boot and mount home. And we need to mount our EFI partition into boot. And we need to mount our ZFS home volume into mount home. Oops, got a sudo it. Just really be logged in as root, but I'm not. So now that's basically what we need to do to get the system set up to where the point that if we run this command called NixOS generate config, that it knows more or less what we want to do. It'll generate a configuration that won't be set up to have applications in it and stuff, but it'll be set up with the partitions, the scheme that we use to boot, it'll know about. So let's do that now. It's going to be very interesting and exciting. I can't wait. Here we go. Sudo that. Oh yeah, now we're talking, baby. All right, we got two files. One is hardware configuration.nix and the other one is configuration.nix. And let's see here. Now what we need to do is we need to edit the configuration that it spat out. And we need to, if we just rebooted right now, it would not work. We need to do one other step, which is in install. So it's only generate our config files at this point. And before we do the install, we needed to install the right stuff in order to be able to boot. So let's do that. NixOS. Let's see. No, sorry. MNT. Let's see. NixOS configuration.nix. Now, it generated two files. The other one, the hardware configuration.nix file. As a matter of fact, I'll show you the hardware configuration.nix file. We'll take a look at it real quick. Cat hardware configuration.nix. Okay. So this thing is more or less correct. It says, okay, we have a number of file systems that it's using. Slash is our NixOS root. File type is ZFS. Boot is VFAT, and that's going to be our EFI partition, our boot partition. File systems home is our ZFS home thing. It knows because we mounted it all, and it detected it, scanned for that stuff. We don't need to touch that. That's just good. It'll be included by this other thing, this configuration. .nix file, configuration.nix. All right. So inside of here, we need to, what do we want to do? We want to, right now it's set up to use the system deboot bootloader, which works fine. It's not a problem. We could use that. I have used that in the past, and it works okay even with the ZFS boot. But what it doesn't do is allow you to boot other operating systems. It's only for Nix. So we can use grub instead, which is what I'm going to paste some stuff in here that will allow us to do that. Okay. We don't want that stuff. We want to use grub. Okay, so grub enables, true. Bootloader grub devices equal no dev. That is the correct device, quote unquote, that we want to add our grub to for systems that with EFI or GPT partitions. If this was an MS-DOS, legacy partitioning system or device, then we would put the actual device name in there. But that's not the case for EFI systems. This is a bit of cargo culting. EFI install is removable. I'm not sure if it's actually required. Doesn't seem to hurt anything. It works. So leave it in there. EFI support equal true. That's just if you have an EFI system. Use OS prober will detect other operating systems on the computer when you run the rebuild or install. So a couple other things that we need to do in order to successfully boot with our fancy ZFS thing is we need to tell it that ZFS is a supported file system at boot time. I suppose that adds things to the initrd. I'm not entirely sure. I think it does. Don't have to know. That's a great thing. That's a great thing about it. I don't have to know. And we want to tell it. Please ask me for decryption. The passphrase when you boot in NixOS Stage 1, so that you can get the rest of the way. And that'll just put up in a prompt asking you for your ZFS zpool passphrase. Okay, so there's one other thing we need to do in order for ZFS to be optimally set up here. And this is a little strange. It's not under ZFS, not under boot ZFS. It's under network, and it's host ID. And what we want to do, I'm just going to quit out of here real quick. What we want to do is get a unique, persistent 32-bit identifier for this machine, and they suggest doing this. This Etsy machine ID comes from systemd somehow, and I don't know if it's random or what, but I think it is random. We get the first 8 characters of that. The reason that we need this is that ZFS has this concept of import and export for its file systems, and that this identifier is the I didn't mean to do that. This networking host ID is what it uses to determine which machine last imported a device, which is important. If two machines had the same identifier, they might be considered identical to ZFS when it tries to mount them. And I think that might cause some kind of problem in the future. Anyway, I don't know. We're just gonna do what it tells us to do. We're gonna do what it tells us to do. Just like when you go to doctors. Yeah. Did I copy that already? I was just talking to myself. Okay, yeah, I did. All right, and this is that. Okay. Very good. All right. Oh, and one other thing I'm going to set up for ZFS services. ZFS auto scrub, and that'll every so often run a scrub against that pool, which sort of dumps old garbage out of it, which is good. Networking host name, I'm going to change that to, let's call it ThinkNix, ThinkNix 51, because it's a ThinkPad P51. And the networking we want to use is this network manager enable equal true. These two lines are mutually exclusive, I think. We want to use the network manager thing. To me, network manager means that it is only operable when the desktop environment works. But I found that when I plug a Ethernet cable into the thing, even when the desktop environment isn't running, it works. So apparently I'm just wrong. So that is correct. That will work for us. We want to set the time zone. We are not in Europe. We are in the United States of America. America! And I'm going to comment this X stuff out here because we know this isn't going to work yet. We don't have our Nvidia driver set up, and it's just pointless. We'll enable that in another thing. I'm going to reboot this system in a second once I get this user set up. We're going to reboot, and we're only going to worry about booting with the ZFS root for now, and then I'll go ahead and continue on to set up our GUI, our plasma KDE thing. Okay. So, Krista, that's me. I'm a normal user. Debatable. And one other thing I want to set here is, what do I want to set about him? There's one other thing. It is, oh yeah, the initial password, right? This is the first time the system sets itself up. The password for Chrison will be set to this. Every other time on rebuilds, it's that value is ignored. So as soon as I reboot, I'm going to set a different password for Chrison, and this, because it's in this config file, I don't want this password to work, because that would be silly. That would be ridiculous. You don't put your passwords in configuration files. You don't do that. All right, I'm going to comment out these packages here. I don't want them yet. So we'll eventually get around to that. Okay, and this is actually useful. I do want Vim. The eagle-eyed amongst you may be saying, why is he using Vim? He used Emacs to present the first portion of this. And you are correct, sir. That is a weird combination, huh? Well, I can tell you why. Every Emacs user knows how to use Vim. This is true. It is not true the other way around, but it is true. Every Emacs user knows how to use Vim. You know what we use it for? Editing configuration files, as God intended. And we use Emacs for editing code, as God intended. So that's why. Anyway, I need to change this. I do want Vim for this user, but I want to not use the default Vim. I want to use a package called Vim configurable. And the reason for that, it's a rather complicated, very boring reason, but if you notice right now, if I click on anywhere in this damn buffer in Vim, the pointer follows my mouse click, and you can't copy anything, you know. And I don't know how to use Vim that well, where I can select a region just with the keyboard and copy it. So I don't like that behavior. So I want to shut it off. Right. Now the easiest way to shut it off is to make an etsy vimrc file that has set mouse equal, something like that, or set tty mouse equal or something. And the vim package, not vim configurable, the vim package that we just replaced with vim configurable does not respect that location. So that's why I changed to vim configurable. That's the only reason. That's it. Now, fun fact, if you go search the search.nixos.org website for vim configurable, you'll find nothing. And you figure, well, that's kind of silly because it is a package there. Obviously, I'm installing it. Why wouldn't it show up? Well, for some reason, I cannot fathom that the name that you use while specifying a. I'm sure there's good reason for this. I'm not complaining. It's just I don't quite understand why yet. But the name that you specify in here in the system packages list is the name of the package. But what I'll call the identifier is the only thing returned in search results. So if you search for vim configurable and it's named vim configurable, it will not return. If it's if its identifier, the thing that I'm calling its identifier, or something else, and in this case it is something else called vim hugex. And why these two things are different, I don't know. You tell me. If you know, let me know. God, that was boring. Okay, so we're not going to worry about SSH right now. I don't want a firewall. I'm only going to have SSH open anyway. Let's see. The rest of the stuff is just not interesting. So we're going to save that. And so in the future, I intend to move this stuff over to a NixOS Flake, which is sort of a superset of configurations that can be version controlled that are in like a normal place rather than an Etsy NixOS here. But for now, we're just gonna go. We're gonna go old school and just get going here. So now I'm done editing my configuration of Nix. The only thing I need to do now in order for Nix to go download files and copy them to my hard drive, to my NVMe drive. Right now, remember, the only thing on my NVMe drive is like Etsy, NixOS, these configuration files, then home and boot, which are mounts. That's it. You know, there's no software on them yet. But as soon as I do this, install like that, it's going to, with any luck, put the stuff that we specified in the configuration file on the file system. Let's see. Does it do it? Nope. Bool. Services ZFS auto scrub. Let's see. Auto scrub. What hath I wrought? Is that not what I need? Auto scrub. Enable. That's what I wanted. Sorry. My bad. Enable. Let's try it again. Oops. All right. Network does not exist. Networking. I gotta be honest. I know I have a sense of why people do it. They have strange capitalization in their configuration files, and it's case sensitive. But because it seems like the right thing to do, it seems like you're delineating words, but in reality, it would be foolish to have this options that only differ by case, and it's awful hard to remember what the capitalization strategy is. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying I know I've seen people do this a lot, and I know they have strongly, deeply, religiously held beliefs about it, but it seems a little silly to me. So, anyway, we're getting somewhere. We're getting files and file system. I'll likely speed this up so that you're not sitting here for this. This probably take about 10 minutes or maybe a little less to download this stuff. And once it's done, we'll pick up again. All right. Well, we have to set a root password now. Okay, we set our root password. Our installation is finished. However, I thought of something while I was going. I do need to set up SSH because I need to SSH into the resulting system. I'm SSH into the installer right now, which has SSH enabled, but the resulting system also needs to have SSH enabled, so I can get to our second stage in which we're going to set up our GUI. So let's do that now. Let's see. NixOS configuration. Nix. That is not what I want. The mount version. Search for SSH. Yes, please. Okay. Yep, I think that's all I need to do. I hope. And we'll do it again. We're gonna NixOS install. Should need to do a bunch less. Ask me for a root password again. That's strange. I guess it makes sense. On subsequent runs, we won't use install. We'll use rebuild, and that will not happen again. Okay. So I think that's it. When I'm going to reboot, we still won't have a working GUI. We'll still be in console purgatory here, but hopefully the next step, I'll add the configuration that makes the Nvidia driver work under here. So I'm going to stop recording, reboot, and re-SSH in to the resulting system, assuming that it worked, which I'm pretty sure it did. All right. Well, we got back in. Instead of being the NixOS user, I am now the Chris M user. It is booted from our ZFS boot, well, our boot drive, and then mounted our ZFS root successfully. And although I couldn't show it to you because I couldn't do it without actually recording a screen, as it's booting, it asked me for my ZFS passphrase, which I typed in during that, so it's working just as intended. It works if I type the wrong passphrase, it doesn't work. If I type the right one, it does. Very good. So we have an encrypted root partition, which is excellent. And now the rest of this video is going to be just us coping with our stupid Nvidia Optimus thing. So, very good, very good, very good. Stage 2. Stage 2. Like that infamous Boston album. No, I think that's stage 3, stage 5, I don't know. Okay. So, in this case, we need to edit. We are now booted to a live running system. We are no longer booted to the installer. So it's not in mount Etsy anymore. It's just an Etsy NixOS configuration.nix. Yes. I'm in the wheel group so that I can sudo. And that was done, in my user setup down here, right there. So now we are going to. I think I'm not entirely sure whether. I'm pretty sure that the NixOS installer comes in 2 flavors. The ISO. It comes in a GNOME flavor and a KDE Plasma flavor. And I'm not entirely sure whether that means just the installer's GUI uses that toolkit, or whether the resulting configuration file that it spits out is more tuned for a given desktop, or both. Because I've never actually been able to see the UI. So, but in this case, it has these commented out things for this plasma thing. I did use the plasma ISO, so I imagine that they're kind of specialized. But I imagine you could probably use the GNOME one to generate a KDE install just by typing the same stuff. I can't imagine it works any different. So, although there are minor differences here, they probably will work almost exactly the same way. So, all we need to do is enable our X server. We need to enable our display manager, our login screen thing, and our desktop manager, Plasma 5 enabling true. Now, in a perfect world, that's all we would need to do. If we had an AMD GPU, I'm sure that's probably all we would need to do, because the kernel already knows what to do. But since we have an Nvidia GPU, even though it's nominally Intel, we have to give it some extra boost. We gotta give it some nudges. So the first thing we want to do is we have to appease the political people here and tell Nix to allow unfree, not to allow proprietary software, more or less, because this NVIDIA stuff is proprietary. And we need to set a X server driver, and in that case, because this is the way you tell it that we want to use the NVIDIA X server driver. And then we have a bunch of stuff that is the first half of which is probably all that's required. The second half of which is useful for accelerated video for things like web browsers and Steam and all that stuff. But I'm paste it here. This whole hardware section. We have hardware NVIDIA Prime. One of offload enable or sync enable are true. These are mutually exclusive options. I am in hybrid mode at the moment, and so offload enable is the most reasonable choice for that. I'm not sure what would happen if I booted, instead of offload enable, booted sync enable. In hybrid mode, I think what would happen is the same thing that would happen if it was in discrete mode. I think it would switch to using the NVIDIA GPU. On the other hand, if I have the discrete mode set in the BIOS and booting with offload enable, I'm not sure what happens. I don't know what happens, but it doesn't matter. We don't care. We don't care. We're just trying to get it run, right? We don't care. Okay, I'm just trying to get it run. So, this Intel bus ID and the NVIDIA bus ID, these are the PCI bus identifiers of the two GPUs. I forget how I got these values. I think there's like a PCI utils package or something that you can run LSPCI. Maybe it's LSPCI. And you see all your PCI devices, and one says Intel GPU and the other one says NVIDIA GPU, and these are the identifiers, the 020 and 100. In my experience, every ThinkPad I have, these literally are the identifiers. I have a P51, P50, P52. I think that's it. And all those have this Optimus thing. And if I'm not mistaken, check for yourself. Don't take my word for it, but it wouldn't hurt to just copy this entirely. If you have any of those systems, it'll probably work. So, mode setting enable is false. Not a clue. I don't know what that does. Not a clue. You know, and if all we were worried about was getting the X server to work, I could probably just end. I don't need this OpenGL thing in there, but it's useful to put in there while we're thinking about hardware. It goes in the same section, so it's OpenGL hardware enabling true. There is this is for accelerated video stuff. There's a Intel Media Driver. Steam likes that thing. Its driver name. It's you know, Intel high definition driver, whatever. There's a slightly older one called VAAPI Intel. Its driver name is i965. It also works with this hardware, and it appears that Chromium and Firefox like to use that instead. I think that's how that works. The two other ones down here, VDPAU and libVDPAU VAGL, I don't know. I cargo code them those. I have no idea. Don't know what they do. DRI support, DRI and imbecile support is. I used to know what that meant. Now I forget. It doesn't really matter. I think it's important for Steam somehow. I'm not sure. It doesn't really matter. Just put it in there. It's fine. Let's see. Is there anything else we need for that to work? Yes. We want to, because now we're going to a real desktop environment. Might as well enable printing, enable sound. I don't use the touchpad on this device because it has one of those track points. So I leave the touchpad disabled. I don't know whether, if you do use the touchpad on yours, I'm not sure. I don't know whether you enable that or not. I just don't use touchpad. So let's play around with that. What else we got? I think that's it for getting our system booted to a graphical state. And we can see how to do that. Quit out of this, save it. And then we run, instead of NixOS install, like we did before, because we're already installed, and we want to rebuild the configuration. And often you would see something like this. You'd say NixOS reboot switch, which would build this generation, and then it would switch all of our currently all the symlinks that are in the managed by NixOS that make it believe it's actually Linux would be switched over so that our currently running system would be the new generation. I don't really care about that right now. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do sudo NixOS rebuild boot, which will add the generation, but it won't activate it until we reboot. So let's see what happens. I could type. Did we get any typos in there? Nope. Okay, so this will run for a while, probably a couple minutes. I'll be back. Alrighty. Okay, well that finished. So what I'll do now is I will reboot the machine, and I'll try to get some footage of inside of the KDE environment that was created for us, and that'll work if I get OBS working under it, which should be possible. So yeah, I'll reboot the system, get some footage. I'll be back, man. Talk to you shortly. So, what do I think of NixOS after faffing around like this? Well, I really like it. I really like it. I think it's really interesting, and it's very different, and it's thinking differently about a lot of problems that no one has thought differently about in a while, and that's good. I really like the declarative nature of the configuration. I like doing it once and then forgetting about it. I've worked with those kinds of systems before. I really like those. You know, the downsides are that you have to do a bunch of work at the beginning to say what you want. But you know, it's like learning anything. You know, like the first time you touched Unix, you know, was difficult. You know, you didn't know how to list the contents of a directory or stuff like that. But over time, you know, you realize there's no unicorn system, and there's all kinds of problems. Everything has downsides and trade-offs, and this is one of those things. But I think the trade-offs are in the right direction. I like it a lot. You know, if I need to create some highly repeatable build for work or something, you know, doing this is going to pay dividends. You know, if I can use it for work job, that's not something I would get out of, you know, Ubuntu or Manjaro or whatever, without something like Ansible, and even then without a lot of grace. So I think it's well worth my time to mess around with this stuff. But it's not just the sort of you know, golly gee whiz, aren't we cool programmers sense of things that actually makes it compelling. There is a shit ton of software packaged for Nix. I didn't really realize how much software was packaged for Nix until I started to use it. Man, it's a lot. I just, you know, I mentioned that I had to get OBS working, and I did. It's working fine. And I just added it to my dependencies. Works fine. And so, although it is different and a novelty, and you know, declarative and purely functional and all that stuff, it is the fact that there's so much software packaged for it moves it over into the truly useful category from just sort of, yeah, I really like that. So who isn't it for? Well, I wouldn't recommend it to somebody who thinks it's cool that Steam works out of the box on my Manjaro. You know, like just a typical sort of desktop Linux user, first time Linux user. I can already tell that it's going to be a massive pain in the balls to get things working that might otherwise work fine on other distributions. Just if you do install this thing, just for fun, just ls/lib. You'll see. There's nothing there. So anyway, you know, compiling things requires incantations that aren't required on other distributions. File system structure isn't anything like you'd find on Ubuntu or Manjaro or Red Hat or anything like that. You know, that's painful, but if you've been around the block, you know, a few times on Linux distros over the last, you know, 10, 20, 30 years, whatever, you know that everything's painful. And at least NixOS is trying to address a part of that pain by going after repeatability in a unique, useful way. And it's usually fairly profitable to surround yourself with people that think a little bit different. So I think, you know, learning this stuff for me anyway is certainly worth it. I'm not committed to it for life or anything, or even as my daily driver OS. But I'll try to continue to make this particular system, my second laptop, work, and I'll make more videos about it if I can. And my next video probably be related to doing some needful stuff system-wise, like setting up power management and SSD trim support, and the right shell, maybe my editor, some development tools, video editing software, Steam, that sort of thing. Then I didn't touch on some of the more interesting features of Nix, or more upcoming things like Flakes or Home Manager or anything. I might delve into those as well. But anyway, if you made it this far, God bless you, and thank you for watching.